We're going to be looking at every waiver wire option you should be going for in week 3, including quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and maybe even some streaming defenses. Now, I'm also going to be talking about some guys that I think that you should be avoiding off the waiver wire and just pass them to your league mates. Let them waste a roster spot on those players. I do want to start us off at running back. I'm going to be very brief with these guys at the very top. If they're rostered in over 60% of leagues, I just want to make sure you understand, yes, they are number 1 and number 2 priorities, but in reality, they're not going to be available in the majority of your leagues. Zach Charbonnet already rostered in 62% of formats. He did expand his role this week in comparison to where it was at in week 1. Keep in mind, this was a running back that dealt with an injury during training camp in the preseason. This is going to be a running back that continues to expand his role as the season progresses. You're not going to be looking to start him anytime soon, but if you were to see an injury to Kenneth Walker, then at that point, Zach Charbonnet would turn into a borderline running back 1 in fantasy. And for that reason, he needs to be rostered if he is sitting out there on your waiver wire currently. And then obviously the league winner, it looks like Kyron Williams is rostered in 62% of leagues as well. Kyron Williams will be better than any other player on this video. If somehow you can get your hands on him, you need to make sure you can do so. You had 80 potential snaps for Kyron Williams in this Rams offense this week, and he played 76 of them. He's had 4 touchdowns through the first 2 weeks. I would have never thought in a million years we could have seen this volume from Kyron Williams, but they're talking about going through and trading away Akers. It looks like Akers is just no longer with this Rams team at all, and I really don't think we have to be worried about Ronnie Rivers. Kyron is going to be a top 16 to, I want to say, maybe 18 running back here on out. Now, going over to our next running back. This will be a running back that is rostered in 53% of leagues. So the majority of leagues, if you're in a very active league where your friends know what they're doing, Zack Moss should not be on your waiver wire. But with Zack Moss, similar to Kyron Williams, in the age of committee running backs, in the age where we only see guys go out there and maybe split their backfield 50-50, Zack Moss plays every single snap in his backfield. And when I say every single snap, I mean every single snap. There was not another running back to even touch the field in Indianapolis outside of Zack Moss. Similar to Kyron Williams, this will be a running back that is a locked and loaded top 24 option at minimum for the next 2 weeks. Now, obviously, week 5, at that point, it'll be a little bit tougher to say. At that point, we may end up getting Jonathan Taylor back, and obviously, we're not starting Zack Moss there. But with Moss, I mean, hell, he looked pretty good in this. He didn't score the touchdowns like Kyron Williams. I mean, he had 1, but he had 18 carries. And at the same time, he did get involved somewhat as a pass catcher. He did have 4 receptions out of this backfield. Now, full transparency going forward, whenever Anthony Richardson is healthy and is the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, there, Zack Moss won't have as high of target volume coming out of this backfield because Richardson can run the ball himself. And we know those rushing quarterbacks typically do not check the ball down at a very high rate. But it looks like you may have Gardner Minshew in week 3. So even in a full PPR format, Zack Moss could be viable. Now, going over to our next RB, I honestly did not even include him in our waiver wire video last week. I instead included him on our buy low video because I figured he'd be rostered in every league. Yahoo is telling me that Roshan Johnson is only rostered in 38% of leagues currently. With Roshan Johnson, Deonta Foreman, healthy scratch this week. Roshan is going to continue to take more and more and more of the Chicago Bears offense. He's already almost splitting this backfield 50-50 with Khalil Herbert. It's a 40-60 split at this moment. But with Roshan, we know it's his second NFL game ever. Second game ever, ladies and gentlemen. He's getting involved as a receiver. He's a great pass blocker, and he's been more efficient than Khalil Herbert on a per-touch basis so far this season. Now, going over to a running back that will be available in every league, I understand those other guys, it's going to be dependent on how shallow your format is. Matt Breida is going to be who everybody's talking about this week. Matt Breida will most likely be the running back that's there for the Giants that a lot of people are going to go out there and grab because you have Saquon Barkley with an ankle injury. Well, I want to walk through the range of outcomes. And yes, Matt Breida looks like he is most likely the starting running back for the New York Giants this next week. I just want to let y'all know the New York Giants play the San Francisco 49ers on Thursday night. In this game, the 49ers are favored by 10 points. And if we look at this profile for Matt Breida over the past 4 years, since he has left Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, Matt Breida over 4 seasons now. Keep in mind, he's been with the Giants 2 years, and we have seen some Saquon Barkley absence before. He's had 1 game with 10 or more carries. And in the last 4 seasons, he's had 0 games with 100 or more total yards. In those 4 seasons, there have been contests where the starting running back in his backfield went down. What's most likely going to happen here in this New York Giants backfield is they're most likely going to be splitting it a couple different ways. You're most likely going to have an additional running back in Eric Gray being active, or honestly, if it's not Gray, it doesn't matter. Just name any replacement level running back. You will most likely have an additional player active alongside Matt Breida for this Thursday night game against the 49ers. If he is going to be splitting the backfield in what appears to be a very bad offense, in what appears to be one of the toughest matchups you can find in the NFL, going up against the 49ers as a 10-point dog, Matt Breida can't be someone that we start this week. I don't know if we want to start him week 4 either. And then by then, we'll probably have Saquon Barkley back. So to be honest with you, some of these wide receiver options I think would be a little bit more appealing. But as we get over to these wide receivers, let me remind you, if you haven't done so already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to check out any of these pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, you can find the link in the description or in the comment section. And if you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog, you're going to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Plus, you're going to be getting our updated top 150 rest of season rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be getting a special Kenny Pickett pick'em, more than less than half a passing yard against the Cleveland Browns tonight. So please make sure you are taking advantage of that. Only going to get all of it with promo code FLOCK. Now, David Montgomery did get injured, so I know a lot of people are going to run out there and they're going to look to Craig Reynolds to slide in for the David Montgomery role. I definitely think that Craig Reynolds will have a role here, and it's going to be a little frustrating taking away from Jahmyr Gibbs. But you'll probably see Gibbs have 60% of this backfield. You'll see Craig Reynolds just a worse running back than David Montgomery in a slightly smaller role than David Montgomery. No reason to pick him up. Montgomery will be back in a few weeks. It sounds like a bone bruise, 2 to 3 weeks. So yeah, please don't pick up Craig Reynolds. Let someone else on your waiver wire waste a roster spot on him. But now let's go over and let's look at, actually before the wide receivers, I want to give a shout out to Jordan Love. Jordan Love went out there in week 1, had 3 passing touchdowns, 0 interceptions off of 27 attempts with Christian Watson missing from this offense. Week 2, we thought it was going to be a little bit tougher. Week 2, not only do you take the top wide receiver, but you take the second best weapon in this receiving game. Some people would argue the first best in Aaron Jones out of here. And what does Jordan Love do? He goes out and in 25 pass attempts, he has 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Jordan Love currently sitting at 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on the season, while his top targets are Jaden Reed with 13, Romeo Doubs at 8, Luke Musgrave at 7, Dontavian Wicks, someone I've never heard of before, at 6, Samori Toure in here at 5. Like, no-name players. The man's getting it done. When you have Aaron Jones, when you have Christian Watson back in, I cannot wait to see what we are going to be getting from Jordan Love in this Green Bay Packers offense. Now, let's go over to the wide receivers at this point. There are a considerable amount of names to consider. The number one guy that is rostered in more than 60% of leagues, so a lot of y'all, you aren't going to have access to him. Nico Collins, rostered in 61% of Yahoo leagues currently. This is a wide receiver I honestly doubted coming into the week. I did not tell people to start Nico Collins. I didn't even rank him as a top 30 option. It's embarrassing, and I promise you I will this next week, because you are now looking at back-to-back weeks here for Nico Collins, where in week 1, he has 11 targets, which leads the team. He has 80 receiving yards and 6 receptions. Now, I didn't want to read too much into the 11 targets because overall, CJ Stroud had 44 pass attempts, right? You have 44 pass attempts. Ultimately, 11 targets isn't too much at the end of the day. That is a 25% team target share, but it's just not as exciting as the raw number looks. And then going into week 2, Nico Collins, 7 receptions, 146 receiving yards, the receiving touchdown off of 9 targets. Now, similar story here. CJ Stroud is at 47 passing attempts this week. Now, if we were to check, I would actually assume that CJ Stroud right now maybe leading the NFL in pass attempts. This is something that I wish I could come out and say, oh yeah, it's not going to continue to happen. Well, in reality, the Houston Texans are horrendous. You look at this next week, I believe the Houston Texans, I mean, we're about to talk about them in our defense portion of this, but they look like they are 9.5-point dogs. So they're going to continue to trail games quite often. Nico Collins is going to continue to command volume, maybe even if it is garbage time. Maybe this can be like the Allen Robinson and Blake Bortles garbage time just bonanza that we had back in, I believe, 2015. Now, going over to another wide receiver in this offense, if you think that the passing volume is going to remain here for the foreseeable future, Tank Dell will be a wide receiver you could go out there and pick up. Now, full transparency, I'm not a big Tank Dell guy. If you go through and look at the wide receivers that weigh as little as Tank Dell does, going back since the year 2000, you've only had 3 finishes in fantasy football with more than 100 PPR points in a single season. And those guys barely met that threshold. Like the ceiling for these players, like 8 points per game. And that's the cream of the crop. That's not even looking at a rookie season. So coming into the year, I was very hesitant about Tank Dell. I'll say I still am very hesitant about Tank Dell. And I by no means am I going out there and starting him anytime soon. But if this is going to be that Blake Bortles 2015 Jags team where you just have so much passing volume and garbage time here, there could be some viable options if you're like a 14-team league with 2 flexes to go through and start Tank Dell during a bye week. Now, going over to a wide receiver that's maybe a little bit more appealing. In this Rams offense, obviously, you have no shot at Puka. Now, Tutu Atwell is a wide receiver that performed well this past week as well. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I am not running out there to grab Tutu. This is going to be a player that I'm probably letting someone else grab similar to Tank Dell. I mean, please, by no means think you need to blow a bunch of fab on Tutu. He did have 9 targets this week. He had an impressive week 1 as well. But ultimately, you had 55 passing attempts from Matthew Stafford. 55 passing attempts and 9 targets is less than a 20% team target share. Puka had 20 targets. Kyron Williams had 10. Tyler Higbee had 7. Once you add in Cooper Kupp into this offense, I think Tutu Atwell is a complete non-factor. Maybe he's a field stretching option in this offense that provides space underneath for Puka to be flooded with target volume. And he can be very valuable for the Rams in that fashion. I just have a very hard time imagining us getting excited to go through, start Tutu Atwell anytime over the next 2 weeks. And then once we get cut back, hopefully in 3 weeks by now, I don't see the viability here. Of course, you have the open rush spot, go for it. Just don't be aggressive. Now, our next wide receiver I want to be looking at will be Josh Reynolds. Another player I'm not too pumped about. I mean, we called him a fake guy after week 1, saying, okay, if you're starting Josh Reynolds after week 1, you are probably just falling for the Thursday night hype, the week 1 hype, first game of the season. He did score a few more touchdowns, and I know I probably am just an idiot for saying this, but it's still just random variance, ladies and gentlemen. Every once in a while, you're going to see some secondary wide receiver in an offense grab a few random touchdowns at a super high clip and come back down to earth later in the season. Now, I will say, if this Amon-Ra St. Brown injury is serious, and this is going to be something we're going to be continuing to monitor, then at that point, I think Joshua Reynolds could be appealing. And if Amon-Ra St. Brown were to miss, then you can go through and start Reynolds. But if Amon-Ra St. Brown comes out and he's completely good to go, which I honestly kind of expect that he will be, then at that point, I mean, Reynolds going to be someone that I'll let one of our other league mates go out there and grab. Now, another wide receiver that I do want to be looking at that I want to make sure we are all on the same page. Do not take him. Nelson Agholor kind of falls in the same bucket. Journeyman wide receiver that, I mean, really, there's no reason to assume that he finally turns into a fantasy viable option at this point. He leads Baltimore in receiving. Hell, you have Odell Beckham Jr. dealing with an ankle injury. Do not pick up Nelson Agholor. Do not think his 17, 18 points is going to continue to the future because you have no Odell. This will be funneled through Andrews. This will be funneled through Flowers. And honestly, I'd be more excited about Bateman than Nelson Agholor going forward. Now, I do want to go ahead and look at a tight end as well. Talked about him on the waiver wire video last week, but Zach Ertz continues to get a considerable amount of volume. And I think you can go through. I think that you can take Zach Ertz and start him in full PPR formats immediately. He's getting consistent target volume. He's getting those cheapo receptions that we saw from Dallas Goedert on Thursday night that maybe they don't really impact you too much from a real life perspective. But if it's a full PPR format, we're going to take those PPR points, especially at tight ends. So yeah, I think Zach Ertz, exciting. Go through, pick him up, and almost play him immediately. Now, going over to defenses, there are 3 streaming names real quick. I want to let you know. The first streamer will be the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, only rostered in 15% of leagues. Right now, they are 9.5-point favorites over the Houston Texans. And typically what we are looking for is we are looking for teams that are favored heavily because we want the opposing offense to our defense having a bunch of pass attempts in garbage time in the second half so we can generate sacks and generate turnovers. So our other defense will be the New England Patriots. They are rostered in 65% of leagues. Going to be very hard to get them. We have to give them a shout out though because they are going up against the New York Jets. And then last but not least, we will be going with Kansas City, where you have them rostered in 39% of leagues, going up against the Bears. Justin Fields looks like he's going to be a turnover/sack machine at this point. And yeah, I mean, the Bears are going to be trailing this entire game, so we're going to get a lot of Justin Fields dropbacks. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking out this video. If you have not done so already, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to check out any of those pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, you can find that link in the description in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK is going to get you a 100% deposit match up to $100. Plus, you're going to be getting our 2023 rest of season rankings and tiers and a special Kenny Pickett more than less than half a passing yard against the Cleveland Browns tonight. But that's all I got for you. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate you. I really hope you have a great day, and I really hope that we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.